I know many of you are frowning at the thought of Astartes becoming Chaos Space Marines, but this is quite often, and not just individuals but many a times, an entire chapter would turn to Chaos for reasons that would only make sense to them. Anyway, here are 10 examples of Loyalist Astartes who have turned to Chaos in the Post-Heresy period. Let's begin. So the first here is Nihilen. Nihilen was a promising lexicanum of the Salamanders chapter, a psychic warrior trained under the stern guidance of Chief Librarian Velcona. Alongside his fellow neophyte Pariel, Nihilen studied the mysteries of the warp, but his curiosity drove him down darker paths. Fascinated by forbidden lore and esoteric truths hidden from Imperial doctrine, he began to experiment with knowledge that skirted the edges of heresy. Alarmed by his pupils' descent into dangerous doctrines, Velcona shackled Nihilen with a null collar to suppress his psychic powers and exiled him to die in the ruins of a desolate world called Lycanor. But death never came. Instead, cast out and stripped of purpose, Nihilen rejected the Imperium and the Emperor, embracing the whispers of the warp and the promises of the Chaos Gods. It was on Lycanor that Nihilen fell fully into darkness, eventually joining the charismatic renegade chaplain Vitan Usharak, a former black dragon turned heretical demagogue. Together they forged a twisted alliance, with Nihilen becoming a devoted acolyte of Chaos and later a powerful sorcerer in his own right. After Usharak's death on the ash-choked cemetery world of Moribar, an event that left Nihilen horribly burned while trying to save his fallen master, he forged the remnants of Usharak's warband into the Dragon Warriors, swearing vengeance on his former chapter. So over the decades, Nihilen masterminded acts of treachery, the formation of cults and diabolical rituals that culminated in direct assaults against the Salamanders and their sacred homeworld of Nocturne. With his power enhanced by demonic pacts and ancient sorcery, and his soul twisted beyond recognition, Nihilen's fall to Chaos became not merely a rebellion, but a crusade of spite, fueled by betrayal fire and the long shadow of a master he still seeks to raise from the dead. So going on to the next one, here we have Adheron. He was once a decorated captain of the Sons of Guilliman, a successor chapter of the Ultramarines. He was a skilled commander and a paragon of the Ultramarine discipline, but over time, disillusionment with the rigid structure of the Imperium and the futility of endless wars began to rot away at his loyalty. Whether lured by forbidden truths or slowly consumed by ambition and bitterness, Adheron ultimately turned into the worship of the Chaos Gods. When he defected, many of his own company followed him into damnation, forming a renegade warband known as Adheron's Reavers. Under his command, these former Astartes became vicious corsairs, launching hit-and-run raids on Imperial convoys, ravaging outposts and thriving on the chaos they left in their wake. The first known atrocity attributed to Adheron's Reavers was during the Canbaics genocides in the year 709 of M41, where they instigated violent uprisings across a dozen vulnerable Imperial worlds in the Kybnex Nebula. Their aim was to destabilize the already strained region and create a power vacuum in which chaos could take root. However, their plans were unexpectedly thwarted by rogue traitor Jov Zuckerman and his then arch-militant Thor Malkin, whose brutal counter-offensive shattered the rebellions and drove the Reavers into retreat. Adheron and his warband disappeared into the shadows for over a century, until resurfacing during the infamous Siege of Vrax in 813 of M41. There, they were identified for the first time operating alongside other major Chaos Space Marine factions, marking their transition from isolated corsairs to a more integrated force within the wider war machine of the traitor legions. The third one here is Constantinus. He was once a proud sergeant of the Sons of Guilliman's chapter's 4th Company and became infamous as Constantinus the Liberator, a traitor whose fall sparked one of the most costly and disruptive civil wars in his sector. The Constantinus Iconoclasm is what it's called. Originally deployed to the world of Novaterra to combat a Tyranid incursion, Constantinus and his squad succeeded in driving off the Xenos threat, and they were left behind to root out any lingering Genestealer presence. For 3 grueling years, Constantinus led relentless cave patrols and extermination campaigns. When rumors surfaced of an infestation amongst the planet's aristocracy, he acted swiftly and ruthlessly, executing nobles and their families in a purge that horrified the population. Instead of gratitude, he was met with outrage. When the people rose in revolt, Constantinus responded with fury, massacring thousands, flattening city sectors, and even turning on his own battle brothers who dared to stop him. So standing before the blooded ruins of Curtis, He denounced the Imperium and declared himself ruler, claiming that the Emperor had made him into a monster. In the chaos that followed, Constantinus rallied the disillusioned masses and forged an army millions strong, ultimately overthrowing the imperial governor and renaming the world Constantinium. Under his despotic rule, anarchy flourished, mobs ran wild, and dissent was met with brutal repression. As the cults of chaos took root, Constantinus bested rival warlords and chaos champions, bending their warbands to his will and becoming a full-fledged chaos lord. With his newfound power, he launched a brutal campaign across neighboring systems, plunging the entire region into war. The Imperium responded with overwhelming force. Multiple Space Marine chapters, 12 Astra Militarum regiments, an entire battle fleet, and the assassins of the Officio Assassinorum and the Inquisitors of the Order Herodoticus were deployed. 13 years of grueling warfare finally ended with Constantinus' death at the hands of an imperial assassin, but not before his rebellion had left the sector scarred and countless worlds in ruin. Now number 4 is Corpax. He was once a noble warrior and a dutiful Astartes of the Consecratus chapter, which is a successor chapter of the Dark Angels, the First Legion. As a seasoned veteran, he had fought against heretics and Xenos alike, but his fate was forever changed during a brutal campaign against the Death God, where he and his brothers clashed with the pestilent forces of the Chaos Lord Typhus. Amidst the decay of a plague-ridden battlefield, Corpax was mortally wounded and exposed to the dreaded zombie plague, a horrific contagion that turned its victims into shambling, rotting corpses. His brothers believed he was dead and then abandoned his broken body to the rot. But Corpax did not die. Against all odds, he reawakened as one of the undead. And yet, unlike the others, he retained his mind, with his memories, his intellect, and most disturbingly, his will intact. However, this was not a fluke of biology, but a perverse blessing from Nurgle, the Plague God, who had chosen Corpax to be something more than a mindless vessel. So over time he came to accept and even revel in his new form, interpreting his resurrection not as damnation, but as rebirth. He embraced Nurgle's gifts wholeheartedly and turned his back on the Imperium, rising steadily through the ranks of the Death God and eventually finding his way into the Black Legion. His unique blend of decaying immortality and strategic brilliance made him a valuable asset to Abaddon the Despoiler, who granted him command over entire warbands and tasked him with spreading ruin across the galaxy. Next here we have Gallus Herodoticus. He was once a noble and steadfast chapter master of the Seekers of Truth, a loyal Space Marine chapter known for their unflinching service to the Inquisition. The Seekers were often deployed at the behest of the Orders, acting as the mailed fist of the Emperor's hidden hand. Yet with each campaign, Herodoticus grew more disillusioned. Again and again, he was commanded to burn settlements, execute civilians, and silence entire populations, not for treason or heresy, but for the possibility of dissent. The burden of slaughtering innocents weighed heavily on him and his chapter. Faith began to waver, and the morale of his warriors faltered. In a moment of desperation, Herodoticus fell to his knees beneath the stars and prayed to the Emperor for guidance. He begged for a way to see into men's souls, to know when a lie passed their lips, so that the truly guilty might be punished and the innocent would be spared. And so his prayers were answered, but not by the Emperor. It was Tzeentch, the changer of ways, ever hungry for cracks in fate. He heard Herodoticus' plea and granted him a dark blessing. From that moment forward, Herodoticus and every one of his chapters Astartes could hear every lie ever spoken. What seemed like a divine miracle swiftly became a curse. The constant barrage of falsehoods, half-truths, and deceitful thoughts shattered their sanity, and the Seekers of Truth then turned on the Inquisition, denouncing it as a puppet of liars and hypocrites. Within days, the chapter had gone rogue, consumed by paranoia and fury, convinced that the Imperium itself was irredeemably corrupt. Herodoticus led his brothers into the worship of Tzeentch, now embracing their new curse as a sacred calling. Now the sixth entry here is Paramix. Chaos Lord Paramix was once a revered chapter master of the Sanctors of Terra, who were part of an unknown founding but were a loyal Space Marine chapter that answered the call of the Abyssal Crusade, which was a misguided holy war driven by the visions of a powerful saint called Basilisk. But the Crusade led them into the heart of damnation, the Eye of Terror. When they emerged out, they were no longer loyal servants of the Emperor, but twisted devotees of Nurgle, and Paramix, now bloated with corruption and clad in rotting ceramite armor, leads his warband, who are now called the Blighted Claw. In one of their attacks, the Imperial Agri-Wall of Gerhoff came under the Blighted Claw's attacks, who spread a virulent demonic plague across the planet. The plague not only destroyed the world's crops and livestock, but to the horror of Gehov's defenders, the plague did not simply kill its victims, but turned them into plague zombies who sought to consume the flesh of the other living. Once a noble chapter master, he is now a plague lord of Nurgle. Number 7. Sane Wolfbat. So this guy was once a proud wolf lord of the Space Wolves chapter, the fierce warrior whose loyalty to Fenris and the Emperor was beyond question until his faith was broken by the grinding, dehumanizing machinery of the Imperium he served. Disillusioned by the bureaucratic stagnation and the cold indifference of the Imperium's command, Wolfbat turned into chaos, finding solace in the unrelenting fury of Khorne, the Blood God. Branded as a traitor and a renegade, he carved a brutal path of destruction across the stars, drawing the ire of the Great Wolf himself. In the year 913 of M41, Logan Grimnar, the Great Wolf, tasked Harald Deathwolf and his great company with the sacred duty of hunting down the Oathbreaker. The pursuit led them to the Clades system, and finally to the storm-racked moon of Ganymedes, where Wolfbat had retreated to complete a dark summoning ritual to bolster his forces with demonic reinforcements. After weeks of tracking them through ash-choked mountains and lightning-torn skies, Harald Deathwolf's hunting pack cornered Wolfbat atop a lonely peak, just as the ritual neared completion. And in a climactic battle, the traitor fought like a beast possessed. As Harald brought his axe down to end Wolfbat's life, a bolt of lightning, whether by chance, fate, or the wrath of Khorne, struck them both. When the smoke cleared, Wolfbat was gone, his body reduced to ash, and all that remained was his shattered frost axe, which was taken promptly by Harald and his space wolves. Then next we have Zufur the Impaler. He was feared as the Butcher of Vrax, a monstrous chaos lord who led the Skull Takers, a brutal warband of the World Eater's Chaos Space Marines. This was during the infamous siege of Vrax, but Zufur was not always a warlord of the Blood God. Millennia ago, he was known as Sergeant Balzac of the Loyalist Stormlords chapter. His fall began during the brutal sacking of the hive cities of Paramar, where he was captured after sustaining grievous injuries in battle against the traitorous World Eaters. Taken prisoner, Balzac was subjected to horrifying torture, to mind-breaking psychosurgery, and a regimen of combat drugs designed to erode his imperial conditioning and remake him into the image of Khorne's butchers. What emerged from this torment was no longer the noble Stormlord he had once been, but a towering muscle-bound monster filled with unrelenting bloodlust and hatred. Reborn as Zufur, he became a terrifying champion of chaos, trading loyalty for slaughter and rising to command a warband of his own under the ever-hungry gaze of the blood god Khorne. The ninth example here is Casus. So, proud Sergeant Casus of the Ultramarine 2nd Company, yep, the boys in blue, he was a stalwart defender of the Imperium. During the brutal campaign to reclaim the heretic city of Saphir, he was separated from his brothers by the demon Parmenides, who imprisoned him in a realm of corruption and despair. Alongside him was Bal's sister Escarion, who watched helplessly as the demon stripped Casus of his memories, of his fate and purpose, leaving behind a hollow shell vulnerable to the whispers of chaos. In time, Casus fell into the rot-laden embrace of Nurgle. His once pure form slowly decayed into a vessel of filth and disease. Yet Escarion never gave up hope. For years she tracked the corrupt marine across war zones and plague-racked worlds, clinging to hope and the belief that his soul could still be redeemed. At last her perseverance bore fruit. On the very soul where he had been lost, Casus returned to face Parmenides one final time. In a final act of atonement, he activated an exterminatus warhead implanted within his bloated, dying body, obliterating the demon and shattering his grip over a dozen corrupted worlds. His death became a modest victory and somehow a broken hero's final redemption. And lastly here we have a former member of the Raven God chapter. His name was Argan Karax, who for some reason, whether corrupted by the ruinous powers or left the light of the Emperor out of disdain, isn't known, but what is known is that he defected and pledged his allegiance to the ruinous powers. He then formed a formidable warband of Chaos renegades, establishing a marauding pirate fleet in the Vidar sector. Eventually, Karax's warband ran afoul or attacked the Eldari from Carafwell Eondon, and in that battle, he was defeated by Prince Iriel. So seeking vengeance, Karax fought the upstart Eldari prince during the Battle of the Burning Moon, and here the Chaos Lord was eventually defeated when he faced the prince in mortal combat. But in retribution or revenge, his surviving ships of the warband launched a devastating cyclonic torpedo attack on Eondon, which killed tens of thousands of Eldari in that Carafwell. And this just goes to show that while the Imperium are the main enemies of the Chaos Space Marines. They are not above attacking other Xenos, especially the Eldari. And with that, we come to the end of the video. If you like this one, then watch this other one too, the one in the end screens. Do hit that like button for support, and smash the subscribe button to be a part of Legion Nutbook. Not like subscribing does anything nowadays, but hey. Also, yeah, do hype up the video, because there's something new here with YouTube. It's called hyping. So if you can hype the video, well, that'll be awesome. Anyways, till the next time, take care, boys.